Lines at 8 o'clock. Pope Benedict says sorry to Irish Catholics for decades of child abuse by priests. The leader of the church in Ireland welcomes his apology.
He recognises the deep shock of parents at the terrible things that took place in what ought to be the safest and most secure environment of all.
Victims say the Pope's letter to be read out at weekend masses doesn't go far enough.
No apology to victims for the scurrilous way they have been treated by the church authorities when they attempted to bring their experiences to the attention of the bishops and religious leaders.
Hundreds of flights are grounded on day one of the BA strike. Unions claim there's huge disruption, but the airline says it is coping with limited services.
Riot police clashed with rival demonstrators in Bolton. 67 people are arrested and several injured.
Getting tough with the city. David Cameron says he'll impose a new tax on banks if he's elected, even if other countries don't.
Also coming up in the next hour, not so smart after all. We look at the high price of using so-called smartphones abroad.
And Scotland beat Ireland in Dublin for the first time in 12 years on the final day of the Six Nations rugby.
As soon as it struck it, the clock hit 79.
A very good evening to you. The Pope has apologised to people who were sexually abused by Catholic priests in Ireland. In a letter, he said they had been betrayed and he was truly sorry.
Some victims are disappointed that Pope Benedict did not go further and acknowledged that the Church had covered up allegations of abuse. Our religious affairs correspondent Robert Pigott reports from Armagh.
A church whose teaching celebrates the innocence of childhood today faced its day of shame. The Pope himself told abusing priests and the bishops who covered up their crimes that they'd brought damage and dishonour to the Roman Catholic Church. In his letter, the Pope addresses the victims directly, praising their courage for speaking out. He says, "You have suffered grievously, and I am truly sorry. Your trust has been betrayed, and your dignity has been violated." The leader of the Irish Church told the congregation at Mass of the Pope's scathing criticism.
He recognises the deep shock of parents at the terrible things that took place in what ought to be the safest and most secure environment of all.
Official reports have described decades of sexual abuse of children carried out in church-run schools and homes. Some who were abused say the Pope's response falls short.
Most importantly, the Pope has not acknowledged in any way the role of the Catholic Church in covering up the sexual abuse of children. There's a very wholesome apology, but the apology is about the abuse committed by other people and doesn't make any reference to the cover-up by the Catholic Church.
The Vatican is to carry out what amounts to its own inquiry, sending senior officials to inspect Irish dioceses. Their job is nothing less than to change the culture that allowed abuse and cover-up to flourish in the Church. Robert Pigott, BBC News, Armagh.
Over the past 2 decades, the Roman Catholic Church in the US has been embroiled in a series of child sex scandals. Back in 2004, a report commissioned by the Church said that more than 4,000 priests in America had faced sexual abuse allegations in the last 50 years, in cases involving more than 10,000 children. Becky Ianni, who was herself a victim of abuse, is a member of the group, the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. She can speak to us now from our Washington studio. Thank you for joining us. Seeing what's happening in Ireland must just bring back such terrible memories.
Yes, it does, but it brings back frustrations of when the Pope came to visit here in April of 2007, and he said many of the same things he said in the letter, but we haven't seen evidence of change, and I don't think you're going to see it in Ireland either.
Do you think this letter goes far enough?
No, I don't. It doesn't address the Vatican's part. It doesn't hold the bishops accountable, and without accountable, there's no deterrence. It doesn't reach out to other victims who haven't come forward. There's a lot that it doesn't say.
There is talk that higher-up officials within the Church will then go to smaller parishes to inspect what is happening. Do you think that will have any influence?
No, I feel to get the truth, we're going to have government investigations, much like the Murphy report. And just going to a few dioceses, what about the rest of them? What about across Europe? This is happening across the world, and it needs to be addressed in an unbiased way.
How do you think the church can recover from this?
I think the church is going to have to truly be open. They're going to have to open up their records. They're going to have to start fighting legislation that helps protect victims. They're going to have to make a national registry of sex abusers within the church.
Do you think there will be a huge backlash because this is just, well, it's just such a terrible turn of events?
I think what you're going to see is that more and more victims are going to come forward because of the courageous victims in Ireland that have come forward, and in Germany you're going to see more and more victims come forward, and I think that this is just the beginning.
And in terms of reconciliation, where's the American church now?
You know, the American church had a policy that they put in place in 2002 for zero tolerance, but again, in America, not a single bishop has been disciplined. And so I don't see there's no evidence that there's been a lot of change.
And as a victim of such abuse, how do you come to terms with something it's just very difficult to understand?
Well, for me, I had to leave the church. You know, I was raised Catholic. I raised my children Catholic. But when I went to the church and I have seen the atrocities, I just couldn't stay part of it. So I lost my church as well. And that's been very difficult for me. And I found healing through SNAP and through meeting others that understand what I've gone through. And so that's why I'm a leader. I want to help reach out to those victims across the world that are still hurting.
Becky Ianni, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thank you.